All right, guys, just give me a second here. I'm just trying to get to the beginning. You can see I was editing that at the end. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Ms.C. I'm oftentimes the person who sends out the communication. I work with our students who are writing technical papers to help them with the editing process. It's not an easy task, right? These are students, as you well know, who are middle school, high school. We have a couple of university students. So they're a little bit, those university students, they know a lot more about writing research papers in general. The same is true for our high schoolers. But writing a technical paper is even different from like an APA research paper you might have done in your class. So it does require a little bit of understanding about how it's different. So my job tonight, and I'm going to move quickly, but I believe Mr. Simmons will make this slide deck available to you if you're interested, if you're going to be a person who's writing a paper. Some of you who've written with me before may remember that I've also gone through the steps of the process after the abstract. But many of you have never even written an abstract before. So we wanted to start off with that just to kind of give you a refresher of what that is. And most everybody who's here, and certainly if you're going to be signing up for these, knows that one of the great things about the Wolfpack is that you get experience not only writing, but then presenting at these conferences. And I think that's one of the most exciting parts. I know some of you like building the satellites, but when you're able to talk about it as well, that really makes you, kind of like even more impressive on your resumes. So the first thing that I will share with you, and if I'm going too fast and you need me to slow down, just kind of holler out because I won't know otherwise. But again, you'll have this available for you, is to explain what it is. An abstract is kind of like a summary of what your paper would be. The weird thing is that technically abstracts are done after the fact. So like it would be ideal if you had already been doing research over a period of time and you had already done some construction of whatever your project is, like building out your payload or whatever it is. And the abstract usually comes after you've done all of that. We do it a little differently. We write the abstracts. If we are selected, then we have to write out the whole paper. And it's super important if you're not going to be willing to follow through with the commitment of writing a paper that you not actually submit, because we've had a lot of students in the past who all of a sudden were like, oh yeah, well, I can't travel to that conference. Well, if you can't travel to the conference, if you're selected, then they're not necessarily going to publish it as well. So it's really important that you be kind of picky about the many conferences that you have to choose from. And it's not to say that you shouldn't try to get selected, but it is important to realize that we're kind of moving past. We have too many students to be able to say, yeah, everybody just go ahead and enter it and hold a spot for somebody who instead could actually travel to present at that conference. So I hope that makes sense. Many of you have done the science fair before. So I like to start off by talking about the abstract that you're probably most familiar with. And that is, of course, that kind of explanation that talks about your question, the results, the research in general. It's very short, usually about 250 words or less, kind of goes in that corner of your board, that kind of thing. Well, technical paper abstracts are similar to that in that they are shortened summaries of that overall project. And again, it's kind of weird because you're going to be imagining that you've already done some kind of research and paper, and you're going to kind of present this idea that you have to actually do it instead. But whatever it is that you put in your abstract, your final paper kind of has to deliver what you promise up front. If you say that you're going to be doing a study of some kind of battery, to see if it's a novel way to send a satellite up, then you have to actually end up, providing in that paper all that research that you promised on the front end. And so it really is kind of the summary of what your ultimate paper will be. If any questions about that before we go on? Because I know it's hard to wrap your head around, like, how in the world would I even write about a summary of something I haven't done yet? You'll have to holler out because I won't see you all. So you just have to holler out. Otherwise, you're just like, yeah, okay, I don't even know yet what my ideas are. And we're going to talk about that soon, too.
I have a question.
Hey.
So the topic for our papers, does it specifically have to be like a solution to a problem or something physical, or can it be almost like a discussion of the topic or an introduction of a new idea?
Oh, well, it can't. So I think what you're saying, and I'll let Mr. Simmons chime in if he wants. So on this, I think what you're saying is can it be theoretical versus like, can it be, does it have to be an actual product? Yes. Is that what you're saying? I think you can, obviously a lot of these CubeSats were theoretical, right? Like the proposals that you guys do for like FlipSat hasn't flown yet. And the one for WolfSat, those are theoretical papers, right? And so a lot of that hasn't been done. In your case, like you were doing not the drone, I am a glider. Okay, yeah, that was me acting out the glider. So the glider, right? So that hadn't been built yet, but you had done some research that was kind of like, getting you in that process, but it was more theoretical. It hadn't really been tested out yet. So you can, but the important part is figuring out a problem first, right? Like whatever it is that you're trying to solve. Because in the case of like a lot of students have been doing whatever it is that they've been working on with a proposal for a CubeSat kind of lends itself to maybe a science fair research topic or beyond. So a lot of times you can use these same topics for more than one conference. Did I answer your question?
Very. Thank you very much.
Okay, like too much, right? Okay, cool. All right, so let's talk about what goes into an abstract. And again, this will be familiar to you if you've ever done a science fair abstract because it is kind of similar. If you think about it again as just a summary of what your ultimate goal would be, then that's pretty good. Think about them in sections, although they're not labeled in these sections, but having an introduction, a body that kind of goes more in depth, and a conclusion. I also, of course, spelled out a little bit for you there what you should expect to address within those sections. They don't have to be paragraphs, by the way. They can just be part. You'll see an abstract. I've got samples on here that all this information is kind of in one block text within those small, word counts or whatever they are. But for sure, you want to make sure that you're establishing a background on the topic. You want to make sure that when you're getting into the body that you're talking about things that are elaborating upon that, methods, any theories that you have. And you have to usually have theories. I mean, it depends upon which conference you're entering, but that was something that we had to work really, really hard at, many of us in the last year, and even the year before that, was I don't know what theories exist about this because this is just a small idea I have. How do I even find them? And, that's where Google becomes your best friend, is actually researching. So we're going to talk about the importance of researching before you begin writing anything in a few moments. You'll also note when I show you some samples on these abstracts that there are words such as keywords, acronyms, and nomenclature that oftentimes you have to kind of include at the bottom. And so keywords are just like what you guys are used to if you're trying to search something, on the internet. You want to use words that are if someone was searching for a paper on that topic, they would be able to easily find. Acronyms, of course, instead of saying CSLI, if I'm going to say that in the paper, I need to spell out what that stands for, CubeSat Launch Initiative. And nomenclature really comes down to oftentimes symbols or formulas. So if you are doing a kind of a technical paper where you have any kind of math that's associated with it or laws, you have to kind of include those in there for your reader to see as well. And this will make a lot more sense when you see some examples here, which is where we are now. Let's see if this will open. This will be fun. So this is my most recent abstract that I did with Dr. Shinde and Mr. Simmons that we presented. This is not the final, by the way. This was just kind of like the draft before we set it. So you'll just at least get the idea. This wasn't the finalized one. But you'll notice that it has a title. It has the authors. The authors will, depending upon which conference you're in, will have a formatting technique. You see here that there are stars by my name because I was the main author. And then the people who are kind of co-authors, who are not the lead, also get ascribed these letters that kind of then get spelled out underneath here, telling who they are and how a person who wanted to reach out to one of the writers could do so if they wanted to, if they were reading the paper. Most of the people who would ultimately be reading your paper, by the way, are going to be university students who are interested in doing the same research or something along those lines, or even professionals who are looking to do, who would be reading your paper like you're the expert in the field. And that's why these are a lot different from what most of you end up doing in school. And we kind of warn you on the front end, it's a super rewarding process, but it's also work. It requires a lot on your part, but it's really impressive. Notice how with my abstract here, if I had this formatted not on a document, it would be on one page, but you're kind of getting an idea. I'm not going to read it to you because you'll have access to go back and look at it, but it spells out what the problem is. I have my keywords here. I had no nomenclature, so if you don't have any nomenclature, you don't have to include it, but really short. And I'll give you a couple other examples here as well. Let me move this out of the way. So let's look at Sammers from CapSat. This was back in the day, folks, back in the day. Is it on your screen where you guys can see it? Because I'm not able to see. I'm not able to see it. Let me move folks out of the way. All right, same thing again. You're going to notice some similarities because a lot of these are following what we use for the IAC, the International Astronautical Congress. And it's got the title, the authors, once again, the kind of telling who they are. Lengthwise, you can see it kind of fits on one page. We got the keywords, acronyms again, and of course, his was way more technical than mine. So a lot of explanations of what these formulas might look like. Okay, again, not going to read them to you, hoping just that you're getting an idea. You will have access to them. I also went on Grammarly for you, and I found this because I know a lot of you like to use that. This gives you a really good detailed explanation about how to write one, the purpose and so forth. So just know that these sources, or rather resources, will be there for you when you need to. It's going to talk a little bit about APA format. If for those of you who've done MLA before, APA is pretty similar. It just has a couple of easy changes that this will kind of help you to understand. And then I even have this other link to another one that has six sample abstracts on it for you. Much higher level than I would be able to write. We're talking grad work, but grad student work. It at least will give you an idea. These are not long, right? These are not long in length. It's just that whatever you write in here needs to be delivered in the paper when you finally get around to doing it. And this is, I've got one last slide for you here, and then I'll take any questions if you have them. But the question that we always want to ask is like, okay, it's great. Yeah, I get the idea. I've got to write a summary, but I have no idea how to even come up with an idea. And that's where you have to read. If you do get selected, you're going to have to read more. The more you read on a topic now to see what has already been done, the better it will be for you, the easier the writing will be, and you'll just understand your topic enough to where if people are asking questions, you can answer them. So it's super important. I asked Mr. Simmons earlier today, what are some that he looks into? And so there are a couple ways you can go about reading material, right? You can just say, I'm going to sit down and I'm going to spend 2 hours and I'm going to search the internet and see what's out there. That's one way. But you can also subscribe to these like newsletters or these news feeds, and they'll just pop into your, your email. And you can say, I want to subscribe to one a week or one a day, and give some time to seeing what's going on in the news or in those fields. So for example, this one is space news. I'll open it quickly here. And space news, just kind of, you can see across the top, there's certain areas, things along here, if you want to look into policy or politics to see what's going on. And it allows you, of course, to kind of click on many different current news events that are going on with regards to space. So I could just scroll through there. I can, just read up on whatever I want to do. There are magazine subscriptions, newsletters, things that I can kind of sign up for, right? That's one. Space Daily is one that Mr. Simmons says that he gets every day, and he may have mentioned it to you before. It's a news feed, so I can either go to their website or I can get it in my inbox. And having it in my inbox reminds me, oh yeah, I've got like 20 minutes today between this class or whatever. Maybe I'm going to see what's going on in the news. Don't just, find what's going on with titles, but make sure that you're reading the articles to see, because I think this is how people found out about the plastic, that the bacteria or whatever that was eating the plastic. It's just going through these kinds of news feeds to see what people are talking about and what research is being done. Notice they have other ones you can join, Moon Day, if you're interested in the moon and that's your thing, the Moon Daily, all that kind of stuff. I won't go through every one of these, but I would point out just the ones that I have highlighted here for you, that again, you'll have the link on. Scientific American is where Mr. Simmons also goes. It gets a news feed from. So for those of my debaters who are familiar with like those think tanks, a lot of times that's kind of similar to this. I want to show you this one before I kind of leave it over to you for questions too. This is more of a policy kind of think tank, and we have actually met up with the Aerospace Corporation a couple of times. There's a lot of interesting resources on here under the resource page. So let me see if I can, this is blocking me. Look, they have technical workshops, which I thought was cool. Way over my head, but you can sign up for some of these. And then the other one I want to show you is the publications. So there's so much information out there. It's just a matter of, instead of you knowing what your idea is already, you just have to read to come up with one some of the time. And that's my best advice to give to you when it comes to being able to write an actual paper, is to read. And that's it for me. I'm of course going to be able to share this with you, but if you have any questions for me, now's a good time to kind of clarify. All right, Elliot, thanks.
So you said that there was a word amount and it varies between each conference, but like what is like the average amount?
250.
250 words. Okay. Thank you.
There might be some that are longer, right? Some that are
Yeah,
longer,
yeah.
500. So imagine 250 to 500, but it would never be like the ones that I've seen are really like a page long.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Yep. Sebi, sorry.
So speaking of average amount of words, is there an actual limit to how many words you can have in the abstract, or
A limit? You mean like a minimum? The max is, yeah. So when they say like a 250 word limit or a 500 word limit, that is the max.
oh, all right.
Yeah. Anybody else? Well, you guys are easy. So I will share that with Mr. Simmons if he wants to share it out with you. If you want to reach out to me instead, just because you're like, hey, I have like, here's how I've started. You want me to look at it? I'm happy to look at it for you and help you in that process. Ultimately, if you are selected, I'll be working with you on the edits anyway. And is there anybody here who has had to go through edits with me? I think I saw, was it Yasmin? Are you here? Yeah. Yasmin, do you want to comment a little bit on like what the paper writing process, not to scare anybody, but just so that they understand it's not like turning in a paper for school?
Yeah, so normally we'll write like Ms.C will have specific deadlines that are like maybe a month or two before the paper's due, and like the 2 months before she'll be like, okay, I need like a rough draft, and then a month before it's due, like a final draft that she can go through and edit and then send you back edits, just so we're not like rushed 2 days before it's due trying to all like email back and forth. So like every couple of weeks we'll get edits back of things, and it'll be like 2 or 3 rounds of that.
And yeah, so just that's why I don't be alarmed. You will get a lot of edits back, but you have to look at it this way. You guys are writing at a university level, and very few of you are university students. So it's not expected. Nobody expects you to be able to do that. As long as you're willing to put the work in, we can help you get published. It just you have to be willing to show up and do the work. That means research and writing and editing. Those are the big three. Any other questions? All right, guys, before I leave, the one final thing that I want to say to you is I cannot stress to you how important the research part is. If you don't know for sure an exact topic, and if you haven't been working on something already, so like Sebi's group with the there I go again, the glider, they already have an existing body of research. They could be adding to that. If you're working on a proposal for a CubeSat, you could be starting that process. You can be starting to think about, something within that. So if you already have something, you can do that. The final thing that I would mention to you too is it doesn't have to be you alone. You'll notice that there were names that were more than one on those papers. It's just that gone are the days where we're doing 10 people on a paper. We have to limit the voices. You can have multiple people on your team, right? You can have 10, 15 people building out whatever it is that you're working on. But ultimately, you have to kind of limit the voices in your paper, because imagine your favorite author and your least favorite author getting together and writing. Two different writing styles in the same, it sounds cacophonous. It sounds like bad music put together when you try to do that, okay? All right, Sebi, one more question?
Yes, so sorry. So one last question. All right, so you mentioned like after we have, so after we actually submit the abstracts, how much time do we have in between the time that we know whether or not we're accepted and the time that the paper is due? I know it varies for each conference, but will we be sent or be emailed just, I don't know, maybe some spreadsheets of deadlines?
Yeah, well, first of all, I can tell you that we generally, what's really been helpful is that there's usually a lot of time from the time that you submit your abstract. When they select you, we've usually had a good 6 months to even longer. Like sometimes we know, that it's going to be coming up. We got to plan for it and you got to start writing. But I would say that it's, as far as spreadsheets or when things are due, when you get accepted, you're going to get a letter from them, and they're going to have exactly what I'll get, which will be like a timeline of when things are due. What Yasmin was trying to explain to you is that I micro kind of like build it into smaller parts to where those deadlines don't become overwhelming for you, because you guys all have schoolwork too. So I might say, hey, draft by this time earlier than what they're looking for, so that there's ample time for several rounds of edits. You know what I mean? So kind of like, as you remember from the last paper, it might be, all right, now we got to get our slide deck ready. And then now we got to go through edits. So I generally build time in on the front end. So I'm pushing you harder on the front end, so that by the end comes around, we have plenty of time to go through those iterations. But yes, you will have plenty of time. It's not like, hey, you got accepted, it's due tomorrow.
All right, great, thank you.
All right. Anything you want to add, Mr. Simmons, before I sign off? Well, guys, it was great to see some of you, and I look forward to a new round of proposals. Have a great night.